Hello, this is James with a new story on my author channel. I hope you enjoy my story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Betrayal has a distinct scent, a bitter cocktail of lies and deceit that, once inhaled, forever alters your perception of those closest to you. For me, it began not with a bang, but with a whisper in the dead of night, a whisper that tore the fabric of my reality and revealed the man I loved as a stranger. My name is Clara, and this is the story of how my husband, Leo, thought he could outmaneuver me. It began with hushed conversations in the dead of night, mysterious bank transactions I hadn't authorized, and a name I'd never encountered before, Evelyn Reed. Leo wasn't merely planning to walk away. He intended to strip me of everything we had built. But he misjudged my resolve, assuming I would simply crumble. Instead, I acted preemptively, securing what was rightfully mine, long before he made his final play. Within a week of his true intentions surfacing, his entire scheme imploded. But the worst part wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the realization of how long he had been plotting it, the sheer volume of lies he had told, and the extreme measures he was willing to take to utterly ruin me. I awoke to an empty bed. The cold sheets beside me were a silent testament that Leo had been gone for some time, the indentation of his head still visible on the pillow. Initially, I reasoned he might be in the bathroom or getting a glass of water, a common occurrence after a long day. But as I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible murmur of his voice reached me, low, quiet, and deliberate, certainly not the tone for a casual phone call. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by a sliver of moonlight filtering through the antique stained glass window, painting long, eerie shadows across the polished hardwood floor. A knot formed in my stomach, tight and cold, as I slowly padded barefoot, drawn by an instinct I couldn't ignore, towards the sound. "Just a little longer," he was saying, his voice a smooth, almost seductive cadence. "She doesn't suspect anything yet. We need to be patient." I froze mid-step, my breath catching in my throat, a sudden chill spreading through my limbs despite the warmth of our home. Leo's voice was undeniably smooth and reassuring, as if he were calming someone down, or perhaps persuading them. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against my bones. Who on earth was he talking to, and more importantly, what was I not supposed to suspect? I stood there, straining to hear more, pressing my ear against the closed bedroom door, but the subsequent words were muffled, his tone dropping to barely a whisper, indistinguishable from the soft hum of the refrigerator. My fingers curled into tight, white-knuckled fists. This was no late-night work call. Leo never whispered on work calls. He often conducted business with the speakerphone on, his voice booming through the house, never caring if I overheard his business conversations before. My mind raced through a cascade of possibilities, each one more dreadful and illogical than the last, until one chilling thought solidified. This was personal. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a few moments, I heard his footsteps approaching. My body instinctively reacted. I had just enough time to dart back to the bedroom, slipping silently under the covers before he rounded the corner. My pulse thundered, a deafening roar in my ears, as I slid back under the covers, feigning sleep with a carefully composed stillness. A moment later, the bed dipped with his weight shifting beside me, and I felt the warmth of his presence, but I kept my breathing even and steady, forcing myself not to twitch. A few minutes passed, an excruciating silence, and then he let out a slow, relaxed exhale, as if nothing was amiss, as if he had merely gone for a glass of water. I turned over, blinking up at him with what I hoped was a convincing, sleepy gaze. "Where were you?" My voice came out soft and groggy, as though I had just woken up from a deep slumber. "Bathroom," he muttered without a flicker of hesitation, his eyes still heavy with sleep, or so they seemed.
A lie.
My gut screamed it. And the phone call? Leo barely flinched, his composure remarkable. Just a client. Had to smooth out some details for a case that's closing next week. I stared at him, searching for any telltale sign of deceit, a nervous tick, a shift in his gaze, but his eyes were as unreadable as ever, a placid, dark pool. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe it really was just work, an unusually secretive client. But that whisper, that sentence, "She doesn't suspect anything yet," it echoed in my mind, a chilling refrain. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a bitter taste rising, and forced myself to roll over, feigning continued sleep. My mind was screaming, every neuron firing, but I pushed it down. Not tonight. Not yet. I needed to see more. The next morning, the unease lingered like a phantom limb. I woke before Leo, the first rays of dawn barely painting the sky. He was still sound asleep, his arm draped across the pillow where my head should have been, his face a picture of serene innocence. I slipped out of bed, careful not to disturb him, grabbed my phone, and padded barefoot to the kitchen. I didn't typically check our bank accounts. Leo managed most of our finances, priding himself on his meticulous record-keeping, and I had never felt the need to question it. Our financial arrangement had always been one of mutual trust. But something felt profoundly wrong now. I unlocked my banking app, my fingers trembling slightly as I scrolled through the transactions, my stomach tightening with each cryptic line. $500, $1,200, $750, $2,000. A dozen relatively small but frequent withdrawals over the last 3 months, all originating from our joint savings account, were glaring red flags. While Leo and I shared expenses like the mortgage, utilities, and groceries, we also maintained separate accounts for personal spending, for gifts, or individual splurges. These transactions were clearly not for bills, not for investments we had discussed, and certainly not for anything we had mutually agreed upon. There were also several transfers to an unknown account labeled only with an alphanumeric code, each transfer mirroring a withdrawal, making them seem even more suspicious. I took a shaky breath, my hands gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Behind me, I heard the faint rustle of sheets, followed by approaching footsteps. I quickly locked my screen, dropping the phone onto the counter as I turned to see Leo leaning against the doorway, rubbing his neck, looking disheveled but otherwise normal. "Morning," he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "What's for breakfast?" I forced a smile, my face feeling stiff. "I was about to ask you the same thing." He smirked, stepping forward to pour himself a cup of coffee. "Guess it's your turn then." I watched him take a sip, his free hand resting casually on the counter, inches from my phone. "I checked our bank account this morning," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Leo froze for a fraction of a second, his grip tightening imperceptibly on the mug before he forced a casual chuckle, but his eyes were suddenly alert. "And there are a lot of small withdrawals," I continued, crossing my arms, maintaining eye contact. "Things I don't recognize. And transfers to an account I don't know." He barely hesitated, his mind clearly working overtime. "Oh, those. Just small investments, babe. A few business opportunities that came up unexpectedly." "Business opportunities." I pressed, my voice rising slightly. Leo nodded, setting his cup down, feigning nonchalance. "Nothing to worry about. Short-term gains, high return. I didn't want to bother you with the details until they matured." He was lying. I knew it. The easy smile, the slightly too quick explanation. I just didn't know why or what kind of business involved such secrecy. For the rest of the day, I tried to shake the growing unease, but Leo's behavior only fueled it. He was inseparable from his phone, taking calls in the other room and always placing his screen face down on the table when he was around me. He would casually dismiss my questions about his sudden workload or late nights at the office. Every time I looked at him, I felt an invisible wall between us, one that hadn't been there before, constructed brick by brick with his lies. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind refused to be still. Leo had always been confident and smooth, a man who could talk his way out of anything, a charming presence in any room. But I had been with him long enough, 8 years of marriage, to recognize when something was off, and something was definitely off. I turned to face him. He was already asleep, his breathing steady, his face calm, like a man with nothing to hide. I wasn't convinced. A cold voice in my head whispered the words I had been trying to suppress all day. Am I being paranoid, or is something really wrong? The doubt refused to fade, even as the morning light filtered through my window, painting the room in pale gold. I had spent the entire night tossing and turning, unable to shake the feeling of deep wrongness, the sense that my life was slowly, subtly, being dismantled around me. Leo's voice from the night before, casual and dismissive, yet calculated, echoed in my mind. The tone of someone hiding something in plain sight. I forced myself out of bed and went about my morning routine, showering, dressing, but my movements felt mechanical. My thoughts stuck in a continuous loop, replaying every interaction, every red flag I had ignored or downplayed. Then, Leo strolled into the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune, as if nothing had changed, as if the previous night's conversation hadn't happened. "Morning, babe," he said, pressing a quick kiss to my temple, a familiar gesture that now felt chillingly hollow. "I was thinking we should probably get our financials in order. Just in case of emergencies. Purely for administrative ease." I froze, my fingers tightening around my coffee mug, nearly cracking it. "Our financials?" I echoed carefully, trying to keep my voice neutral, my mind racing. "Yeah," he said, leaning against the counter, sipping his coffee as if this were the most normal, mundane conversation in the world. Like, "Do you have a full list of your accounts, passwords, assets?" That kind of stuff. "We should keep everything in one secure place, just for peace of mind." I stared at him, my heartbeat drumming in my ears, a frantic rhythm against my eardrums. Leo had never shown any interest in my personal finances. We had a joint account for household bills, but our personal savings, investments, and individual assets had always been separate, a mutual agreement for autonomy. It was just how we'd always done things, a quiet understanding. I swallowed, forcing a neutral expression onto my face, masking the rising tide of alarm. "I mean, I guess I could put something together if you think it's necessary." His lips curved into a small, tight smile, but his eyes flickered for just a second, a micro-expression of something akin to triumph, before settling back into a calm facade. He nodded as if it were no big deal before changing the subject entirely, moving on to discuss plans for the weekend. But my mind was already racing, connecting dots I hadn't dared to before. This wasn't about us. This wasn't about being prepared for emergencies. Leo was preparing for something, and whatever it was, he didn't want me to see it coming. He wanted a complete picture of my financial vulnerabilities. That evening, Leo was uncharacteristically relaxed, almost celebratory. He laughed at the television, scrolled through his phone casually, and even suggested ordering takeout from my favorite Thai place, making a show of being the attentive, doting husband. He was playing the role to perfection, and that's precisely what made my skin crawl. Something had profoundly shifted in him. His movements and his speech were all too easy, too well-rehearsed, like an actor hitting every mark. Then it happened. Leo got up to take a shower, his phone, a sleek, expensive model he guarded fiercely, lying abandoned on the coffee table. He never left his phone unattended. Ever. He'd take it to the bathroom, to the kitchen, even just to grab a glass of water. I stared at it, my pulse quickening, a sudden rush of adrenaline flooding my system. The screen was face down, as it had been for weeks, a constant barrier between me and whatever secrets he was keeping. But then, as if the universe were throwing me a lifeline, a notification illuminated the screen, a text message from a name I didn't recognize. Evelyn Reed. My breath hitched. Evelyn. The name from his whispered call. I didn't have time to think. Instinct took over. I reached for the phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost fumbled it as I tilted the screen just enough to read the message preview. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost there. Don't slip up now. My breath hitched again, a sharp, painful gasp, my chest tightening so fast it hurt, as if an invisible band had clamped around my ribs. The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in, suffocating me. Who the hell was Evelyn Reed, and what did they mean by almost there? My finger hovered over the screen for a half second, just long enough for the wildest, most terrifying thoughts to flash through my mind. Was this another woman? Was Leo planning to leave me? Was he hiding money? Was he planning to take everything? The sound of the shower water shutting off jolted me back to reality. Panic shot through me like an electric current as I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, face down, and sank into the couch, gripping my knees, digging my nails into my flesh to keep my hands from shaking uncontrollably. A minute later, Leo strolled back into the room, towel-drying his hair, humming the same cheerful tune. I forced myself to look at him, to meet his gaze. He was so calm, so at ease, completely unaware that I had just seen something I wasn't supposed to, something that shattered the illusion of our life together. "Did you decide on dinner?" he asked, ruffling his damp hair. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. "Not yet. I'm not really hungry." He grabbed his phone without a second glance, unlocking it effortlessly, with no hesitation, as if there wasn't a single thing to worry about in the world. But I knew better now. I spent the rest of the night trying to rationalize what I had seen, desperate for an innocent explanation. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. Maybe Evelyn was a colleague, a business partner, and keeping me in the dark was about some surprise party or a secret gift. Anything innocent. But deep down, I knew better. The pieces were clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. The secrecy, the disappearing money, the late-night call, his sudden, invasive interest in my finances. I should have confronted him right then and there. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to demand answers. But if I was right, if Leo was truly hiding something this big, this sinister, then I needed proof. Real proof. So instead, I kept my mouth shut. I let him kiss me goodnight, his lips brushing my forehead, a gesture that now felt like a betrayal. I let him slip under the covers as if nothing were wrong, as if our world hadn't just crumbled. And then I lay there, gripping my phone, the screen dark, whispering into the dark, a name that tasted like ash. Who the hell is Evelyn Reed? The next morning, the question still haunted me, gnawing at my every thought, overriding every logical process in my brain. I moved through my morning routine like a ghost, going through the motions, but my mind was locked on one thing: Evelyn Reed. The name lingered in my brain like an unsolved puzzle, a piece that didn't fit but refused to be ignored. Leo sat across from me at breakfast, scrolling through his phone, perfectly at ease, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. I wondered if he had any idea I had seen that message. If he did, he was a damn good actor, a master of deception. But then, as if sensing my suspicion, he looked up and smiled, a practiced, charming smile. "Hey, babe. Can you sign something real quick for me? I nearly choked on my coffee, my heart leaping into my throat. Sign what? I asked, keeping my voice light, masking the sudden spike of dread. Just some financial updates for tax purposes, he said, sliding a thick document across the table towards me, neatly folded into sections. His tone was casual, almost dismissive, but his fingers drummed against the table in an uneven rhythm, a nervous tell I knew all too well, one he'd usually suppress with ease. I picked up the papers, my stomach tightening with a cold knot as I skimmed the first page. The document was filled with dense legal jargon, convoluted clauses, but one thing became painfully, terrifyingly clear as I read further. This wasn't about taxes. This was a property transfer. I flipped to the last page, the signatures page, and the bolded title screamed at me, Property Transfer Agreement, All Assets and Holdings. My pulse pounded in my ears, a frantic drumbeat. My assets, my personal savings, my investments, even my share of the condo, everything would be moved into his name, designated as his sole property. I forced myself to look up, to meet his gaze. Leo was watching me, a careful, expectant smile plastered on his face, a predatory gleam in his eyes. Leo, I said, my voice too controlled, too soft. What is this? His smile didn't falter, not by an inch. It's just a precaution, babe. A legal convenience. Simplifies things for tax season and estate planning. Nothing changes between us, of course. It just makes things more efficient should, God forbid, anything happen to one of us. I stared at him, my grip tightening on the paper, my knuckles turning white. Nothing changes? You're asking me to sign over everything to you. My entire financial independence. Not everything, he said smoothly, as if that made it better, as if his words could diminish the stark reality of the document. Just consolidating things for protection. You know, in case something happens to me, it makes it easier for you to access everything. Or, in case something happens to you, I can manage it without probate. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a potent, surging wave of pure, unadulterated rage. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This wasn't me reading into things, projecting my fears. This was meticulously planned, a cold, calculated move, and he had the audacity to sit across from me and act like it was nothing more than routine paperwork. I placed the document back on the table, slow and deliberate, each movement measured, controlled. Then I met his gaze, my eyes locked onto his, a silent challenge. I'm not signing this, Leo. His smile twitched, a barely perceptible flicker, his jaw clenching for a fraction of a second before he let out a short, hollow laugh. Clara, don't be dramatic. It's just paperwork. We're married. My assets are your assets and vice versa. I held my ground, my voice firm, unwavering. Then why are you so eager for me to sign without reading it? Why is it only my assets being transferred to your name? His expression hardened, the last vestiges of charm melting away, replaced by something cold and calculating. You really don't want to do this, Clara. He leaned in slightly, his voice low and controlled, a subtle shift in tone, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent to it, a warning, a veiled threat that sent a shiver down my spine. I met his gaze, unflinching, my resolve hardening into steel. Is that a threat, Leo? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his expression morphing into something dangerously unreadable, the pleasant mask utterly gone. The smirk he had worn moments ago faded, replaced with an unsettling calm that was far more unnerving than his anger. I just think you're making this harder than it needs to be, Clara, he said, his voice too smooth, too measured, like a predator circling its prey. I swallowed my anger, pushed down the urge to scream, keeping my expression neutral, my face a blank slate. He still thought he was in control, that I was just another pawn on his carefully planned chessboard, predictable and easily manipulated. I let the silence stretch, heavy and pregnant, watching him. The way his fingers tapped idly against the table, the slight twitch in his jaw when I didn't respond, the slow, deliberate breath he took. He was waiting for me to react, to get emotional, to panic, to break. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. So I smiled, just enough to make him shift uncomfortably, a subtle tightening of his lips. "You know what, Leo?" I said lightly, standing up and gathering the papers, not dismissing them, but asserting my control over them. "You're right. I do need to think about this. I'll take these and review them properly." His eyes narrowed slightly, a flash of surprise. He wasn't expecting that. He was expecting an argument, a breakdown. But I had already turned away, walking to the kitchen and placing the documents neatly on the counter, out of his immediate reach, a small act of defiance. I wasn't going to argue. Not now, not yet. Because now I was the one in control. That very afternoon, armed with a property transfer agreement and the unsettling information gleaned from his phone, I made the call to Eleanor Davies, a family friend who also happened to be a sharp, no-nonsense divorce attorney. I explained everything, leaving nothing out: the late-night whispers, the suspicious transactions, the name Evelyn Reed, and Leo's brazen attempt to have me sign away my assets. Eleanor listened patiently, making notes, her expression grim. "Clara," she said, her voice firm, "this isn't just about him leaving you. This is about him trying to financially devastate you. His plan is clear: to legally isolate you from your own wealth before he makes his move." She outlined a strategy that was bold, risky, but potentially devastatingly effective. "We need to act fast. If he's already presented you with this agreement, he's close to his endgame. We need to beat him to the punch." She explained the concept of placing my assets into an irrevocable trust, a complex legal maneuver that, once executed, would make those assets legally distinct from marital property. It would protect my hard-earned savings, investments, and my share of the condo from any future claims he might make in a divorce settlement. The process was painstaking, requiring meticulous documentation and swift action, but it was my only shot. Over the next 2 days, working in absolute secrecy, I meticulously gathered all my financial records, working with Eleanor and her team to transfer every personal asset I owned into the newly established trust. It was emotionally draining, feeling like I was dismantling my own life, but with each signature, each transfer confirmed, I felt a flicker of reclaiming my power. That night, Leo acted like nothing had happened. He moved through our home as if we were still just another happy couple, making himself a drink, watching the news, scrolling through his phone as if he hadn't just tried to con me into signing away everything I owned. He even suggested a movie, completely oblivious to the legal maneuvers I had initiated hours earlier. But as I watched him, a chilling realization settled in my chest like a lead weight. This had never been about saving our marriage. He wasn't trying to fix things. He was setting up his exit, meticulously planning to take everything with him when he left. His kindness, his calm, it was all part of the charade. The next morning, the air crackled with a different kind of tension. I found him in the living room, sipping his coffee, perfectly composed, as if he didn't have a single worry in the world. But when I sat across from him, he glanced up immediately, sensing that something had shifted, that my demeanor was no longer one of passive contemplation. "We need to talk, Clara," he said, setting his cup down with a deliberate clink. I tilted my head, feigning mild curiosity. "Oh." He exhaled as if this were a difficult confession, as if he were the one struggling, the victim of circumstances. I think we should separate. This isn't working anymore, and honestly, I haven't been happy for a while. There it was. He said it like a man delivering a well-rehearsed speech, every word perfectly measured, devoid of genuine emotion. It's for the best, Clara. You have to see that. We've grown apart, our paths diverging. I stared at him, unmoving, absorbing the calculated cruelty of his words. He wasn't asking for a divorce. He was telling me it was happening, on his terms, with him dictating the narrative. I let a beat pass, then another, letting the silence hang heavy, before I finally spoke, my voice deceptively calm. You've been planning this, haven't you, Leo? For a long time. A flicker of something, surprise, then recognition, crossed his face, gone before I could fully name it. It's for the best, Clara. We've grown apart, he repeated, sticking to his script. Grown apart. That's what he was going with, the blandest, most palatable excuse. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table, my gaze unwavering. You mean you want out, but you want to make sure you don't leave empty-handed. In fact, you want to leave with everything I own. His lips pressed into a thin line, the last shred of his composure cracking, but he didn't deny it. The silence screamed his confirmation. I could have screamed. I could have thrown the nearest object across the room. I could have broken down, as he undoubtedly expected. But I didn't, because something had shifted inside me, a cold, steel resolve that hadn't been there before, forged in the fires of his betrayal. So I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head slightly, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. Then, as calmly as I could, I said the words that would change everything, words he never saw coming. I already moved my assets, Leo. Leo's entire posture stiffened. His breath hitched, not enough for someone else to notice, but I did. His eyes, usually so composed, widened almost imperceptibly. What do you mean? His voice was too sharp, too controlled, betraying the tremor of shock beneath. I smiled, slow and deliberate, savoring the moment of his profound realization. Exactly what it sounds like. Every single personal asset I own, Leo. My savings, my investments, my portion of this condo. All safely tucked away where you can't touch them. His jaw clenched, a muscle visibly ticking. I saw it then the second he realized he had lost. The dawning horror, the understanding that his meticulously crafted scheme had utterly failed. He had spent months orchestrating this, setting up every little detail, every subtle manipulation, to ensure he came out on top, to leave me destitute. But he had underestimated me, misjudged my quiet observation and swift action, and he hated that more than anything. A long, agonizing silence stretched between us, thick with the weight of shattered plans and unspoken recriminations. Then, finally, Leo exhaled sharply and stood up, pushing his chair back with a scrape. He grabbed his coffee, took a slow, deliberate sip, then turned to me with a look that sent ice through my veins, a gaze I had never seen directed at me before. His smile returned, but this time it was colder, predatory, devoid of any warmth or charm. You're going to regret this, Clara. I promise you, you're going to regret this for a very long time. I wasn't sure if it was a genuine threat or a desperate bluff, the last roar of a wounded animal. Either way, I was ready. Leo had played his hand, and now it was my turn to play mine. The morning air felt heavier than usual as I moved through my routine. The coffee tasted bitter, the silence of the apartment pressing against me like a physical weight. I told myself I wouldn't let his words from the night before get to me, that his bluster was merely a sign of his defeat. But then came the knock at the door, sharp, measured, official. I set my coffee down, the ceramic clinking against the counter, and took a steadying breath before opening it. A man in a crisp navy blazer stood on the other side, his face impassive, holding a thick, legal-sized envelope. "Clara Keller?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steady. He extended the envelope, his expression blank, devoid of any personal feeling. "You've been served." My fingers tightened around the documents as I watched him turn and walk away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. The weight of the envelope felt heavier than it should have, a tangible burden. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. Still, I forced myself to sit at the kitchen table, exhaling sharply before sliding my nail under the flap and pulling out the crisp, official papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I skimmed down the page, my eyes landing on the financial demands, listed with an audacious precision that made my blood run cold. Leo wasn't just leaving, he wanted half of everything. The condo, the car, 50% of our shared assets, and because he had the audacity and the gall, spousal support, claiming I had a higher earning potential and he needed time to rebuild his life. I let out a bitter, humorless laugh, shaking my head slowly. Of course, he thought he could take everything. He had been planning this for months, probably longer, weaving his web of deceit. The man I married was cold, but this was calculated, ruthless. The smell of polished wood and freshly printed documents filled the air as I sat across from my attorney, Eleanor Davies. Her office was a fortress of legal precision, stacks of files meticulously organized. She flipped through the papers, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips as she reached the detailed financial breakdown of Leo's demands. "Well," she said, tapping her long, manicured nails against the gleaming desk, a sound that oddly calmed me. "He's got nothing, Clara. Absolutely nothing." I raised a brow, a flicker of hope igniting within me. "Just like that? It's that simple?" She glanced up, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Just like that. You moved everything into an irrevocable trust before he filed for divorce. That means, legally, those assets are no longer considered part of the marital estate. He has no access, no claim. He can fight for spousal support, but considering your income history compared to his and the circumstances of his departure, it's not happening. In fact, we might be able to argue for him to pay your legal fees." I let out a slow, tremulous breath, my shoulders finally releasing the enormous tension I had been holding onto since that knock on my door. For the first time in weeks, truly in weeks, I felt a powerful sense of control, of vindication. Leo had spent all this time thinking he was the one orchestrating the game, pulling the strings. He had fundamentally underestimated me. That evening, I had just finished pouring myself a generous glass of red wine, the rich scent filling the kitchen, when the front door slammed open with a violent thud that rattled the frames on the wall. I didn't even flinch. Leo stood there, framed by the doorway, fury rolling off him in palpable waves. His tie was loosened, almost torn, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled, and his jaw was clenched so tight I swore I heard his teeth grind. His eyes were dark, burning holes into me. "You think you're so smart, don't you, Clara?" His voice was sharp, venomous, barely controlled. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my wine, savoring the way his anger twisted around him like a raging storm, completely impotent against my calm. "I think I'm finally protecting myself, Leo," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil I still felt. His hands curled into tight fists at his sides, his knuckles white. "You planned this. You deliberately set out to ruin me." I set my glass down, tilting my head slightly, meeting his furious gaze without flinching. "So did you, Leo. Only I did it better. And legally." Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken accusations, with the weight of shattered illusions. Then, finally, he exhaled sharply, a ragged sound, his eyes darkening further as he muttered, "This isn't over, Clara. Not by a long shot." I exhaled slowly, my gaze unwavering. I had won the first battle, a critical one, but the war, it seemed, had just begun. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small sense of relief, a fragile peace, knowing that Leo had lost his financial grip on me. But I should have known better than to think he would walk away quietly. Men like Leo don't concede gracefully. The first insidious sign of trouble came at work, just 2 days after the initial court hearing. It started subtly, with looks, not the usual passing glances from colleagues, but lingering stares, followed by hushed whispers that cut off the second I entered a room. Colleagues who used to greet me warmly now avoided eye contact, their smiles tight and fleeting. By mid-morning, my assistant, Nina, a bright, usually outspoken young woman, hesitated before stepping into my office, her face a mask of discomfort. "Hey, Clara, I think you should know something." I glanced up from my laptop, already exhausted by the tension in the air. "What is it, Nina?" She shifted uncomfortably, wringing her hands, her gaze darting around the room as if worried someone might overhear. "There's a rumor going around. I wasn't going to say anything because it's completely baseless, but..." She trailed off, her voice barely a whisper. "Just tell me, Nina. Spit it out." She hesitated, then sighed, her shoulders slumping. "People are saying you took money from your joint accounts, that you were..." She swallowed hard, her voice barely audible. "Laundering funds. Illegally transferring money to shell accounts." I stared at her, the words landing like a physical slap, a sickening punch to the gut. What? The absurdity, the sheer malice of the accusation left me momentarily breathless. "I don't believe it for a second, Clara, honestly," she added quickly, her eyes pleading for me to understand. "But Leo, he's been talking to people. Lawyers, yes, but also mutual friends and apparently even some people in professional circles. The story is spreading like wildfire." My stomach twisted into a painful knot, fury rising in my chest like wildfire, scorching everything in its path. Leo wasn't just trying to take my money. He was trying to ruin me, professionally and personally. By the time I got to my lawyer's office, my hands were shaking uncontrollably, my anger a raw, vibrating energy barely contained. "This needs to stop, Eleanor. Now," I said, slamming a stack of printed screenshots of anonymous social media posts and emails onto the desk, my hands still trembling with rage. Eleanor Davies glanced at them, a dry, almost amused chuckle escaping her lips. "Well, he's certainly desperate, Clara. And predictable. He's assassinating my character. My career is on the line." "Yes, but we can use that," she said, leaning back in her chair, a predatory glint in her eye, tapping her pen against the desk rhythmically. "If he's running around making false claims, he's opening himself up to defamation charges. We send a cease and desist first. A formal warning. If he ignores it, and knowing Leo, he will re-escalate. We hit him with a lawsuit that will make him wish he'd stayed quiet." I clench my jaw. I don't want this to drag out in court with endless lawsuits. I just want him to stop. I want him out of my life. Eleanor sighed, her expression softening slightly. "He's trying to bait you, Clara. He wants you to react emotionally, to make mistakes. That's his playbook." She's right. I turned to see my sister, Isabel, standing by the door, her arms crossed, a knowing, empathetic look on her face. Isabel, my rock, my confidant, a brilliant forensic accountant who understood the intricacies of financial systems. "You can't let him dictate your next move. You react too fast, Clara, and he wins." You have to be smarter, colder. I swallowed my anger, taking a slow, shaky breath, nodding stiffly. But inside, I was seething. Leo wanted a fight. He wanted to drag my name through the mud. He was about to get one on my terms. That evening, I drove to the Gilded Spoon, one of the city's most exclusive, notoriously private restaurants, a place Leo frequented for his power lunches. I knew his routine. I spotted him immediately, laughing over an expensive bottle of wine with two colleagues from a rival law firm. The sight of him sitting there, completely unfazed, his charming smile plastered on his face, as if he hadn't spent the past few days systematically dragging my name through the mud, made my blood boil to a boiling point. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't scream. I didn't need to. I simply walked up to the table, my posture rigid, my eyes fixed on his, leaned down, and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "You have no idea, Leo, what you've just started. And you will regret this." Leo's smirk faltered for a split second, a flicker of genuine shock, before he masked it with an easy, dismissive grin, the practiced bravado returning. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, his eyes gleaming with challenge, a silent dare. "Let's see what you've got, then, Clara. Bring it on." I had given him one last warning. Now, I was done playing fair. The gloves were off. Leo had spent weeks trying to manipulate, intimidate, and control me, convinced he was a step ahead. He had underestimated me at every turn. Now, after failing to take my money and after smearing my name, he was taking one final, desperate shot. A desperate man is a dangerous one. I was halfway through my morning coffee, the steam warming my hands, when my phone rang. "Clara," Eleanor said, and I sensed the urgency, the grim inflection in her voice, before she even spoke another word. "You need to come in. Immediately." "What now?" I asked, my voice flat, bracing myself for the inevitable. "What fresh hell has he concocted?" There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling in her office. "Leo just filed a motion for a full financial audit. A forensic audit of all your accounts, all your transfers, going back 5 years." The words sent a sharp, chilling jolt through my body. I set my mug down carefully, inhaling deeply, counting to 3. "On what grounds, Eleanor? We've been through this." Eleanor exhaled, a long, tired sigh. "He's claiming you mismanaged joint funds during our marriage, that you misappropriated assets, and that you owe him a significant financial settlement. It's complete nonsense, a fishing expedition, but that's not the point." Of course it wasn't. "He's trying to drain me," I muttered, the bitterness curling in my chest. "Legal fees, time, emotional stress. He knows he can't win, so he wants to wear me down until I break and concede to his demands." "Exactly," Eleanor confirmed. A sharp, burning anger replaced the weariness. Leo never played to win outright. He played to exhaust his opponent, to bleed them dry of resources and will. "Not this time, Leo," I said, my voice firm, resolute. "I'll be there in an hour." By the time I walked into Eleanor's office, she already had Leo's new motions spread across her desk, annotated meticulously in red ink, a war map of his desperation. "Here's the good news," she said, looking up, a flicker of a smile playing on her lips. "He doesn't have a single piece of legitimate evidence, not a shred. His claims are based on conjecture and malice." She tapped the papers. "The bad news? This could still drag out for weeks, maybe months, if the court entertains his tactics and grants his motion. It's designed to be a painful, drawn-out process." I clenched my fists, determined not to give him the satisfaction. "What's our next move, Eleanor? How do we put an end to this?" "We counterfile immediately," she stated, her voice crisp and decisive. We request an immediate dismissal of his motion based on lack of standing and frivolous intent. We also demand that he pay for all legal costs if the court deems this a stall tactic. We hit him where it hurts, his wallet. I smirked, a genuine cold smile. Let's do it. And let's make sure the judge understands just how frivolous his intentions are. 2 weeks later, the day of the hearing arrived. I found myself sitting across from Leo in a courtroom that felt strangely sterile, almost clinical, under the stern gaze of the judge. He was dressed sharply, meticulously groomed, his tie a little too tight, his smirk barely concealed, radiating an aura of false confidence. He thought this was his moment to reclaim control, to humiliate me. His lawyer, a loud, theatrical man named Mr. Harrington, stood first, his voice booming. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Leo Keller, has substantial reason to believe that Mrs. Clara Keller improperly moved and concealed assets to avoid a fair and equitable divorce settlement. We are therefore requesting a full forensic audit of all financial transfers made in the past 6 months, and indeed, the entirety of their marriage, to uncover the true extent of these irregularities. He gestured dramatically towards me. I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, my face a mask of calm. Eleanor, calm as ever, adjusted her reading glasses, a subtle, confident gesture, and stood. Her voice was steady, precise, cutting through the bombast. Your Honor, all of my client's financial moves were made transparently and legally, well before Mr. Keller even filed for divorce. There is absolutely no evidence of mismanagement or fraud. His claims are baseless and an abuse of court process. She slid a thick, meticulously organized binder forward, filled with my trust documents and the dates of transfer. Additionally, Your Honor, we request that this motion be dismissed with prejudice, preventing him from bringing it again, and that Mr. Keller be required to cover all legal fees associated with this frivolous claim, as this is a clear and undeniable attempt at financial harassment and a thinly veiled attempt to exhaust my client's resources. The judge, a formidable woman with sharp eyes, took her time reviewing the documents, her expression unreadable as she listened intently. The courtroom was tense, silent, every eye on the bench. Leo was watching me, a smug expression on his face, waiting for me to squirm, to show any sign of weakness. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I simply held his gaze for a moment, then looked away, bored. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge looked up, her gaze sweeping over both parties. The court finds no grounds for a full financial audit. The motion is denied. Furthermore, due to the complete lack of evidence presented by the petitioner and the clear indication of vexatious litigation, Mr. Keller will be responsible for all legal fees associated with this claim. With a sharp, resounding clap of the gavel, it was over. Just like that, Leo had lost again, his grand plan unraveling. Outside the courtroom, Leo walked past me without a word, his face pale with suppressed rage, his eyes burning. But as he passed, he muttered just loud enough for me to hear, the same cold threat from before. You think this is over? Just wait, Clara. I had won this round, but I knew Leo still had one last, desperate move left. Men like him don't walk away quietly. They don't accept defeat gracefully. They regroup, re-strategize, and come back with something even worse, something designed to be truly destructive. And Leo, he had been plotting this for too long, investing too much of his twisted energy to let it end here. I didn't have to wait long to find out what his final move was. The call came the very next morning, cutting through the fragile piece of my new routine. Clara, we have a serious problem, Eleanor said, her voice tight, devoid of her usual calm. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles whitening. What now? What is it, Eleanor? There was a pregnant pause, then the faint sound of paper shuffling on her end. Leo and Evelyn Reed have filed a formal complaint. They're accusing you of financial fraud. Specifically, they claim you've been falsifying financial records for months, creating phantom companies, and illicit transfers to hide assets. I felt the air leave my lungs, a cold, crushing weight settling on my chest. If this accusation stuck, I wouldn't just lose money. I could be facing actual legal consequences, a criminal investigation, potentially prison time. This was beyond civil litigation. This was an attempt to utterly destroy my life. They submitted a substantial package of documents. Eleanor continued, her voice grim. Detailed bank statements, alleged invoices, even email exchanges that seemed to implicate you directly. If the court takes this seriously, you'll be forced into a criminal investigation, Clara. This is a game changer. The world tilted slightly, my vision blurring at the edges. I pressed my fingers against my temple, willing myself to stay calm, to think. And the documents, Eleanor? Are they real? A scoff of disbelief on the other end. Absolutely not. They're good, incredibly good. Someone doctored them meticulously, creating a believable paper trail. They must have hired a professional forger. It's almost masterful. Of course. Evelyn Reed, the invisible hand guiding Leo's every treacherous move, clearly more than just a passing acquaintance. A co-conspirator. But, Eleanor added, a flicker of hope in her voice, I had Isabel take a look at them before calling you, knowing her keen eye for financial anomalies, and she found something. A critical flaw. A sudden, sharp surge of adrenaline, replacing the fear.
What?
What did she find? She recognized the timestamps on the supposed financial transfers. Clara. Someone forged them, but they didn't realize one key detail. Those accounts they claim you used didn't even exist when those transactions supposedly took place. They were open months later. It's a fundamental, glaring error for anyone with a forensic accounting background to miss. I let out a sharp, incredulous exhale, a mix of relief and renewed fury. That was it. That was the mistake that would ruin them both. My fear burned away, replaced by something sharper, colder, utterly resolute. Leo wanted a war? Fine. I was about to end it on my terms. By the time I arrived at Eleanor's office, my decision was made, stealing my resolve. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to bury them. I want to go on the offensive, I said, placing my palms flat on her desk, leaning forward, my voice low and determined. Not just to clear my name. I want to take them down. Leo, Evelyn Reed. Both of them. Eleanor studied me for a long moment, a slight, approving smile playing on her lips, a spark in her eyes that mirrored my own newfound ferocity. Then she nodded slowly.
Good.
Because we have enough to do it. More than enough. She motioned to a thick folder already labeled. We contacted a forensic financial analyst, one of the best. They confirmed what Isabel found, the inconsistencies in the timestamps, the non-existent accounts. The documents were indeed expertly doctored, but critically flawed. She leaned back, clearly pleased, a quiet satisfaction in her gaze. So, here's what we do. We file a motion proving the documents are fraudulent. Then, we sue Leo and Evelyn for defamation, for the malicious attempt to ruin your reputation, and for the submission of falsified legal evidence. That's a serious criminal offense. I nodded, my eyes gleaming with grim satisfaction. And I want full damages, Eleanor. Every last cent. I want them to lose everything they thought they could gain and more. Eleanor's smile widened. I thought you might say that. 2 weeks later, the air in the courtroom crackled with a different kind of tension. I faced Leo in court for what would be the last time, the final act in this harrowing drama. I watched him closely as Eleanor laid out her case, her voice calm, clear, and utterly devastating. She spoke with precision, her words carrying across the silent room, each one a hammer blow. These documents, submitted as evidence against my client, Mrs. Clara Keller, were fabricated. We have irrefutable proof, Your Honor, that the financial transactions listed never happened. They are a malicious attempt to defame my client and manipulate this court. The forensic analyst took the stand, a dry, academic professional, detailing every false timestamp, every manipulated number, every non-existent account with scientific precision, dismantling Leo's entire case brick by brick. Leo's lawyers squirmed, their faces paling, whispering frantically among themselves. They knew they were losing, and losing badly. Then came the final blow, the decisive moment. Eleanor placed a new folder, thin but weighty with its implications, on the judge's desk. Your Honor, in light of these fraudulent accusations and the malicious intent behind them, my client is countersuing Mr. Keller and his associate, Evelyn Reed, for defamation, the intentional infliction of emotional distress, and the submission of falsified legal evidence. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, a vacuum where Leo's confidence had once resided. Leo's lawyer turned to him, whispering something urgent, desperate. Leo's jaw was locked, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Finally, his lawyer stood, cleared his throat, his voice strained. Your Honor, my client wishes to withdraw all his claims. Immediately. Of course he did. He had no choice. The judge nodded, her gaze stern. Motion dismissed. Furthermore, given the egregious nature of the falsified evidence, Mr. Keller and Ms. Reed will be responsible for all legal costs incurred by Mrs. Keller, and the court reserves the right to refer this matter to the proper authorities for potential criminal charges regarding the submission of fraudulent documents. With a sharp, definitive clap of the gavel, it was truly over. Just like that, Leo had lost. Completely. As we exited the courthouse, Leo walked past me without a word, his shoulders slumped, defeated. I didn't stop him. I didn't need to. I let him take a few steps before I whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, my voice laced with a quiet, icy triumph. Are we done here, Leo? He didn't answer, didn't turn back. He simply kept walking, diminished, vanished. For the first time in months, I felt something I had almost forgotten. Peace. No more court hearings, no more lurking threats, no more waking up in the middle of the night dreading what Leo would do next. I had won. It didn't feel like some grand, explosive victory, not in the way I had imagined a cinematic triumph would feel. There were no fireworks, no dramatic final words exchanged. Just silence. The kind of profound, settling silence that comes after a violent storm, when the sky is still heavy with lingering clouds but the thunder is gone, the rain has stopped, and the air is miraculously clear. And for the very first time in what felt like an eternity, that silence didn't scare me. It felt like freedom. 2 days later, I met with Eleanor for the last time, our final professional encounter. She slid a final stack of papers across her gleaming desk, a simple, elegant gesture. It's done, Clara. Leo signed the settlement. With the threat of a criminal investigation hanging over his head for the falsified documents, he had no choice but to concede everything. He's also legally bound to pay your legal fees. I exhaled slowly, a long, drawn-out sigh of utter relief, my fingers hovering over the documents before finally picking them up. I scanned the details, even though I already knew the outcome, enjoying the finality of it. Leo got nothing. Not a dime. His financial claims dismissed, His defamation case backfired catastrophically, his professional reputation in tatters. He had tried to destroy me, to leave me with nothing, and in the end, through his own malicious overreach, he was the one left utterly ruined. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, watching me with a knowing, gentle smile. "How do you feel now, Clara?" I let out a quiet laugh, more an exhale than a sound, a release of tension and pain. "Lighter, Eleanor. So much lighter." She smiled. "Good. You deserve that. You fought bravely and smartly." I nodded, slipping the documents into my expensive leather bag. This was it, the final liberating step. I stood, extending my hand, a gesture of deep gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything, for believing in me when I barely believed in myself." She shook it firmly, her grip strong and reassuring. "Go enjoy your life, Clara. You've earned it, every single moment of it." And for the first time in a very long time, I truly believed her. That evening, my sister Isabel and my mother, Sophia, insisted on a victory dinner, a quiet, intimate celebration at Sophia's cozy home. Sophia greeted me with a warm, enveloping hug as I stepped through her front door, the scent of her freshly baked apple pie filling the air, her eyes full of relief and love. "It's over, my dear," she whispered, stroking my hair. "Yes," I murmured, leaning into her embrace. "It is. Truly over." Isabel poured champagne into delicate flutes, the bubbles shimmering, raising her glass with a mischievous, triumphant grin. "To freedom, to new beginnings, and to never, ever letting a man think he can outsmart you again." I clinked my glass against hers, a genuine, joyful laugh bubbling up from deep within me. "I'll drink to that, Isabel. To that, and to having a kick-ass sister and an amazing mother." We ate. We talked for hours, reminiscing about the early days of my marriage, about challenges we'd overcome, and for the first time in months, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the next hit, the next blow. The war was definitively over. Later that night, back in my own, now truly mine, condo, I stood on my balcony, gazing at the Viridia skyline. The city lights shimmered, stretching infinitely into the horizon, a boundless panorama of possibilities. Everything felt different. I was no longer the woman who had ignored the warning signs. No longer the woman who had believed in the illusion of safety, of permanence, of a perfect life that was, in reality, a meticulously crafted lie. I had lost things, trust, years of my life, the version of love and future I thought I had built. But I had gained so much more: strength, unwavering clarity, unshakable control over my own destiny. My phone vibrated on the table beside me. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A familiar, cold dread tried to surface, but I simply inhaled deeply and didn't hesitate. Blocked. I turned back to my laptop, opening a blank document, the cursor blinking expectantly on the empty page. A new chapter. A new story. My story. As I closed my laptop, a quiet, resolute whisper escaped my lips, carried away by the night breeze. This is my story now, and it's just beginning. Before we wrap up, let me leave you with something profound to think about. Life has an uncanny way of testing us in the moments we least expect, often blindsiding us with challenges from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes, the people we trust the most, those we build our lives around, are the very ones who betray us the deepest, leaving us feeling adrift and broken. But here's what I've learned irrevocably from my journey. Strength isn't about avoiding betrayal. It's about how you rise, how you rebuild, and how you reclaim your power after it. When I stood at the precipice of my marriage's collapse, Confronted by the depths of Leo's deceit, I could have let it break me entirely. I could have let fear, doubt, and despair consume me, leaving me paralyzed. But instead, I chose to fight, not just for my finances, for my material possessions, but for my dignity, for my freedom, and most importantly, for my future. And if there's one thing, just one single truth, I hope you take from the story, it's this: you are far stronger than you think you are. If you've ever been blindsided by betrayal, if you've ever felt like the rug was pulled from under you, leaving you standing on thin air, know this: you are not alone. Life may throw its absolute worst at you. It may test your spirit to its very limits, but it's in those raw, defining moments that you discover who you truly are, the resilience you never knew you possessed. And sometimes, walking away from what no longer serves you, from the toxicity that seeks to diminish you, is the greatest victory of all.